good afternoon. Who's tired? Um, wow, I'm really concerned about where we're all headed. But I'm hoping that to close today, I can paint an idea of a future that we're moving into that may not be the doomsday scenario that may be playing in your head right now. My name is Payal. I am the service design principal at IDEON, which is a design studio in London. Um, I came into the world of service design and also into the world of digital, which I believe are actually different worlds, completely by accident. I trained to be a designer who learned how to design built environments. And I spent far too long trying to change the world by building buildings and by building cities. Um, I came to a point where I realized that as an individual, the scale of the impact that I was seeking was perhaps not going to be so if I lived in that world forever. And fortunation or unfortunation aside, stumbled into service design about 10 years ago. Um, it's funny how a lot of what we talk about as service designers is very similar to the fundamentals of architecture. And it's very similar to the fundamentals of how you build something that would last for a very long time and impact people. And I think there's so much that we can learn from the world of physical design that digital design may not need to make the mistakes that physical design may have made before. So it's not actually as bad as it seems. So I'm going to try and take you on a bit of a journey today. So the world that I inhabit is the world on the right, which is looking at systems and really trying to understand really, really complex problems, looking at how you define services for some of those problems, and how you actually try and change behavior. However, the world that I came into this from is the one that I've described on the left. And I'm going to take you through 3 very quick examples of how you can learn from everything that they perhaps possibly did slightly wrong. Who's been into one of these? Who's been into this building? Not one of these buildings. The Bloomberg building in the city. It's fabulous. It is fucking amazing. It is just the nicest piece of architecture grown out of a building that has lived and stood in that space forever. And they've basically just turned it into the marvel that it is. This is Foster and Partners. It is also the most energy efficient building ever for an office space. So the BREEAM rating on it for geeks like me is fabulous. However, when you think about carbon footprints and when you begin to think about energy consumption, you really need to start thinking about the complete life cycle of anything you build. And I think this building is pretty emblematic of it. So for all the headlines that made for REBA and all the headlines that made in every architecture journal ever about how it was going to save energy forever, the truth is every office building or the average life cycle of an office building in a city like London is about 60 years before you have to do something to it. Now, this building has about 9,000 tons of sandstone that came in from Derbyshire. And what is really interesting about that is the embedded carbon footprint of the building even before the building started living. So even if it is the most energy efficient building ever, there is as much tons of non-renewable resources that have been pumped into it. And this is just the stone we're talking about. So let's not get into the metallic fittings that may have been flown in from elsewhere. That this building would be able to actually prove its worth if it was standing for at least 200 years. So for anyone who continues to live for another 200 years, can you just make sure they don't pull it down in about 60? Adidas has recently come up with the first fully recyclable pair of trainers. It's fantastic because for someone who really thinks that every single thing that we do has to be considered, that is pretty awesome. Because at the end of the day, if you can actually take every part apart and actually put it back into the system and think about it from a circular economic way, then there's something really good that we're doing. And they are talking about producing about 11 million pairs of it, right? However, as much as this is very noble thought, and this is no, like, I'm not slagging off anyone here, what is really, really important to consider is what really happens in life. And in that life, teenagers are the biggest consumers of shoes, of trainers, and there are lots of teenagers in the UK who really like their trainers. And so even if all of them bought the Adidas shoes, we still think that just halving the number of pairs that they may own that may not be Adidas is the equivalent of taking as many cars off the road. And I think there are some broader issues we need to start thinking about as people who may be parents, people who may influence those choices, people who may build those digital portals of engagement that allow someone to make a choice. Now, our studio is, we care about everything, and we care about everything a lot, which is an amazing thing. So we went to the strike because, of course, we would, right? And as a part of going to the strike, we built some Instagram filters, which meant everyone had a great time at the studio, actually coming up with ways of talking about this thing that mattered to us. Now, we know that artificial intelligence is being considered one of the many ways of dealing with the climate crisis. And rightly so, it can help make predictions that we weren't able to make before, because human computing can go only as far. However, and you may have heard a version of this before through the day, just training one AI model is the equivalent of flying between New York and San Francisco 300 times. So before we start peddling the idea around artificial intelligence to every single one of our clients who talk about how they would build the next digital universe, there's a few things we need to consider. But I promise you, this is the last doomsday scenario I'm going to paint for you right now. What I am going to tell you right now is that design is political. And for everyone here who thinks it's not, it's perhaps better that you don't practice design anymore. Because I'm assuming I'm speaking to a room full of designers or people who care about design in one way or another. And you don't have to be a designer to care about design. But it is political because every single choice that you make is a political choice. And you really have to consider the world that you want to inhabit, and therefore the world that you want to paint a picture of for everyone you sell it to. Think about, and don't think only of service design briefs, but just think of a design brief that you've worked on in the recent past. So as a service designer, these are some of the things that we're asked to think about. We're asked to think about engagement, about understanding users, about design-led organizational transformation, helping people make simpler choices. You know how this works. The Sustainable Development Goals tie back to each one of these things. And the more we realize that actually everything that happens in the world of policy, everything that happens in the world of politics, everything that happens in the world that talks about a broader future, often happens in a world that is not a world of design. And the more designers can start wanting to be a part of that world, the better off we'll all be. Because we collectively, and I'm pretty sure this room collectively believes that they can change the world. So our physical and digital worlds exist together, right? And let's not kid ourselves. Digital is not a thing on the side. It is pretty much embedded within everything that is physical. And it constantly tugs at our attention. And so we really need to start thinking about what chaos it begins to breed as we move forward. And sometimes that chaos is not actually chaos. It's pretty nice. I mean, every time I look at this video, I am delighted. Because for years of having been an imposter in the digital world, because I came from the physical world, and having been an imposter in the physical world because I didn't care about it enough and wanted to be in the digital world, when they come together, it's pretty cool. And as much as these pirouettes that we talk about seem to work in certain scenarios, we really need to think about what this means for the world as we go forward. Because at the end of the day, the pace of change today is the slowest it's ever going to be. So we're all going to have to figure out how we're all going to hurry up, is what you're thinking. But I'm going to tell you to not do that. Because at the end of the day, our physical and digital worlds have come together so strongly, they're everywhere. They're in our homes, they're in the cars we drive, they're in the food we eat, they're in the ways we breathe. And for everyone who thinks that digital detox is a thing, try and tell me when it's actually worked. because it is so strongly embedded in your physical world, it can't actually work anymore. So hindsight is a really good friend because that's what we spent all of today on. We've talked about where have we come so far. But foresight for a lot of our clients, and for some clients who may be in the room right now, is a very expensive pursuit. Because why would you future cast? Why would you think about a world that you may need to cast 20 years down the line? Because it isn't necessarily a thing we have to deal with today. So let's just go back to the ways we know how to do things, of just figuring out how we got here. We got here because we thought that all of these things were really important in the digital world, and all of these things are just as important in the physical world. We got here because we thought that all of this technology was of some consequence to our lives as we moved forward. And at no point in time am I slagging off tech. Believe me, I'm a big believer in it. And I think all of this used well is a good thing for the world that we live in. However, the world that we live in seems a bit like this right now to me. And there is a fundamental problem with that. That problem goes from beyond my marriage, where it's hard for us to take our phones away from each other, from our faces, but it goes into the social constructs of the worlds that we live in today and the cities that I cared about designing one day. And I don't feel like those cities are those cities anymore. And that makes me really angry. What makes me feel better about it is that we're only 19 years into this century. And about 13 years ago, someone gave some of us a smartphone. It was only about last year that half of the world's population got on the internet. Now, that may seem bizarre for some of you, but I come from India, and not everyone had access to the internet about 5 years ago. What may seem pretty easy to understand today when we talk about genome sequencing, one must begin to try and remember the pace of change, because we used to spend billions of dollars on sequencing once upon a time, and now you can spend $1,000 and get a sense of what's going on with your DNA. So we're moving at these speeds that have long been unconsidered, but we're moving in a way where evolution works in this way. We've known this, like Darwin told us this. Come on. It's at the end of the day, it's always about positive feedback. It's about really taking the capable methods that work in one stage and applying it to the next, which gives you the accelerated pace that you want. But how often in that mode of positive feedback do we look at the negative feedback that we haven't long considered? So one of the things I like to talk about, and if you've seen me talk before, this may have been a slide I've used before, where when I moved to London, we used to buy tickets like in box A. And now you can sort of, get through TfL and all of its routes in many different ways. But if I'm observing this right, most people are still stuck between C and D. Some of us sometimes use E when we forget our wallets at home. And all of us grumble at the guys who are in the F box. And the reason for that is that technology changes really fast, but people don't. And we are beginning to kid ourselves by thinking that just the next big jump into the world of what tech can provide us is going to give us the next solution. So if you're putting tech first, please rethink it. Because at the end of the day, all of us are trapped in the choices we chose to make about 10 years ago, and I can promise you, you continue to make those choices whether you realize it or not. So let's just go back a little. Let me tell you a little, this is my favorite history lesson, and it came from something that I was working on at a place I used to work at, which was called Fjord. In 1920s, between 1920s and 1950s, there were, those two things called the two world wars, and things got really bad. And so economies had to grow. So governments spent a lot of energy and a lot of effort and resources into growing production, because productions equal greater GDP equals wellness, apparently. From that world of product, we went into the world of the image, because now we'd built and sold lots of things, but you had to put a wrapper around it and tell people how they were better than the one someone else was producing. And in the 90s, because of the advent of the internet, we started thinking about interaction. In about 2010, when we got to that little cliffhanger where people began to use the smartphone more and more, we started talking about experience in a more holistic way. Yes, we were talking about experience forever. I was an experience designer before 2010, so I hope we were talking about it then. But the world of experience came into its own and the consumer choices started changing. But that died in 2016. That died when we suddenly started realizing what the effect of these experiences is on us. Because in 2016, Trump got elected. And suddenly we were talking about what it meant for data to be taken away from us as opposed to what we were provided by the digital services that we used. And suddenly we're in this world where human networks become really, really important. We don't talk about consumers anymore. We don't really talk about users anymore. And for everyone who's designing for users, again, you need to rethink it. Because users don't come on their own. They come with their big families, especially if you're Indian. They come they come with their friends from East London that they hang out with. They come from the communities that they champion. They come for the things that they believe in. And they come as a part of this room that believes that something's going wrong and we've got to do something about it. And so let's just go gently into the future. Because all of these users are coming faster than we can imagine it. They're not coming at the pace we would like them to come at. And if you think of the future as being ahead of you and the past being behind you, I can tell you that you're just walking backwards into the future right now. Because you have all the understanding of the past and nothing of the future. So let's just go gently into the future. Because at the end of the day, we have no idea what's in front of us. Even though we think that's what we can see and that's what we can't see, we have absolutely no idea. At IDEON, we talk about it a lot. We talk about it when we have the time, but we do talk about it a lot. And we talk about how all of the work that we do can have an impact on us, on our clients, on society at large. And we look at how our different disciplines, of which there are 5, actually bleed into each other. We like to hire hybrids because we realize that they bring a certain thought to the mix that a purist cannot. We talk about how we can apply the practices and learnings from different sectors and different media into each other so we can evolve the way we design, because honestly, so service design at IDEON is slightly different. We believe that the crafts of digital, of which service design is one, but service design is also outside the crafts of digital, depending on how you're looking at it, can learn a lot from physical design. So what can digital really imbibe? It can imbibe things that people in the built environment practice have talked about forever. They've talked about holistic implications on society. You don't build till when you talk about communities. You talk about simplicity and function. The modernists were building in the 30s in a way that we aren't yet building our digital spaces in the late 2000s. Components and form libraries. Anyone here worked in an architectural practice before? Right, you and me then. Think about it. Those guys were building these libraries in like the 1920s. We are talking about design systems today. We've really got to get our act together. Proportion and format, making people move and behave a certain way. We're not talking about the scale of the eye anymore. That's the world you and I inhabit right now. We're not talking about pixels. We're talking about the scale of the human being. Let's get into that world and really try and understand what really changes behavior. Because eye tracking, it's really. Anyway, what can the physical world learn? Because it's not just one way. What they can learn is adaptability, because that's what the digital world gives us. There are people like Assemble building playgrounds for children or playgrounds for adults in this matter. This one's in Croydon, I believe. It's called the Brutalist Playground, where they actually built nothing. They left pieces of what they would like to build in plastic and in material. It wasn't plastic, but it was basically materials you could move about, like cut tires and things like that. And they left them around this playground before they actually built it. And based on how people moved things around and left them be and played with them, they realized that's what the shape of the playground was going to be. That's really interesting. That's prototyping in our world, right? Prototyping, testing, learning, because architects sometimes forget that the building that they've built will need to change. So anyone who's ever lived in social housing will know that when you're a family of 3, you need a different house from when you're a family of 5. It's a very, very different kind of house, especially when it is not yours, especially when you don't have the choice to move, especially when you don't have the choice to define what happens to your family. And architects are beginning to learn that. How social housing is built today is very different from how it was built 20 years ago. But also the agility and pace. You have buildings cropping up in London within 6 months. We never used to be able to do that. And the reason we used to never be able to do that is because the technology didn't exist for it. But does a mindset exist for what it means to build a building in 6 months versus 5 years right now? Those are questions worth asking those guys who practice built environment. So the experience innovation spectrum is huge. It goes across all of this that I will try not to read off the slide. But effectively, all of these things come together when we start talking about the planet. Because at the end of the day, in a nice animation, it's all about the political, social, and economic forces around us. And those are things we need to consider, not the pixels on our screens, not what begins to happen when we talk to huge organizations about digital transformation. Because honestly, SAP is a bit, it's old news. Yes, we'll all deal with SAP at some point in time. Yes, we'll all deal with the likes of the Salesforces and, like the mammoths of all times, because that's what clients that we work with in the digital space have as some of their core platforms. But let's also think beyond it. Let's think of all of the other things that shape those choices, and let's not question them, because those choices may have been made for the right reasons. And perhaps beginning to disrupt those choices is a disruption of a kind that we begin to cause in a world where we may not need to do so. At the end of the day, it's all about designing those holistic experiences for the people that we design for, understanding who they are and what their needs are, but also understanding the organizational maturity so that we don't try and drag them at a pace that they're not ready for. Because social and planet-centric impact is just as important as organizational impact. Now, that's what everyone does. I'm sure this room is going to nod in agreement, and I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know. But the more we talk in these 4 words, the happier we'll all be, and the easier we'll all feel about the scenario that we're moving into. Because at the end of the day, it all boils down to this. It boils down to finding better problems to solve. It's like putting the cart before the horse if you already know what problem you want to solve and you think it's a great problem without actually having listened to people, without actually having framed those problems. And for everyone in this room, of which I'm assuming there are quite a few, of the people who are service designers, you know what I'm talking about. It's not about better solutions. It's actually about the shape of a problem. So change that these problems try and paint a future, you define a problem to try and define what the change needs to be, does not need to be expensive. But we need to be able to articulate what happens if changing at pace is not something that clients consider. Because at the end of the day, if they only think about digital, we're all in some serious trouble. So where do we go from here? It's a funny one, because I was going through my Twitter feed, which I go through every time I'm about to present at a conference. And I realized that this slide crops up lots of times. It's just about designing for human networks. It's not about digital users anymore. Digital users were a thing we should have talked about in 2006. And now we're way beyond that. We need to start thinking about rights, responsibilities, ethics. And those are questions that are going to be asked of our community over and over again. But I can also assure you, it is not only your responsibility. We are not going to solve the climate crisis. It's not going to happen. What we are going to be able to do is play a part in doing the right thing so that people around us can do the right thing, and then good things can happen. Because at the end of the day, the tenets, the principles, the fundamentals of well-being, of sustainability, of resilience, they don't go flying out of the window when we occupy the space that we think of as digital. They are just as relevant because our digital worlds are actually our physical worlds. So what we do, how we do it, and why we do it can have a huge impact on organizational policy, and we all forget the power that we have. But if you can have an impact on organizational policy, you can have impact on public policy. So let's not try and dumb it down. Let's not try and talk about, and I'm going to perhaps counter what some of you may have been talking about earlier today. Let's not suggest that changing a pixel is going to change the world. It is not going to change the world. This is a complex problem, and it does not need a simple answer. So if any one of you are going to walk away from today and implement 3 things that you think is going to change the world, please think about it again, because you will be doing it still in a silo. So I think it's like user research. You need to go out, listen, come back and synthesize. Because if you solve for every one of those things you've heard of, you'll never come up with that complex answer to the complex problem that someone's presented you with. Let's all question this obsession with growth. We need to start thinking about what makes services better, not bigger. We need to start thinking about the measurement of success. And we need to start thinking about how we drive that in organizations that we work with. Because the only power we have and the only choice you have today walking out of this room is advocacy. You have this choice because you're aware. You're aware of everything that's been said in this room. You're aware of the power that you have. You're aware of the powers around you that may exist, that you may have no control over. So don't feel dejected walking out of this room. Walk out of this room thinking about how you're going to advocate for a future you want to live in. Because I know I do that every day. And that is the most fundamental reason to be a designer today. Every choice that you make, please make it meaningful, because it really makes a difference. Thank you.